Seamus Heaney is now considered to be among the best half-dozen poets now writing in the English language, and is by poet standards a bestseller, having published 5 collections of verse in the past 14 years. Heaney was born in 1939 into a Catholic family in Northern Ireland and grew up on a farm in County Derry. He's now moved to the south and lives with his family in Dublin. Seamus Heaney, those early beginnings, what sort of farm was it?
Well, it's what they called a small farm, but of course, one man's small farm is another man's estate. This was actually about 50 acres. I say was, the land is still the same, but things have changed on the land. I mean, when I was growing up in the 40s, you could still see people ploughing with horses, you could still see people mowing with scythes, you could still see people using forks to build hay. And the rhythm of life was really a medieval rhythm almost, you know. Well, in the 50s, with mechanisation and so on, that all changed. And now the same land, same ground, but there are milking parlours and tractors and mechanisations, and the rhythms have changed considerably.
But all those old rhythms and the, I mean, for example, there are that you've got poems about Thatchers, blacksmiths,
yeah, right,
the forges,
yeah,
and all those things. They are from your very early days.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when I began to write, for some reason or other, it was that first deposit of experience that was almost hermetically sealed, sealed down, came up. And it was like reaching into another world, even though it was a world that I had experienced, say, 15, 20 years before.
Now, your father keeps coming back in these. I mean, images of your father at work, and indeed sometimes of your grandfather as well, and potatoes, digging, and things like that.
Well, I think that is part of my generation's experience in this way, that I was part of the 1947 Education Act transition from land to school, as it were, from the earth of labour to the heaven of education. Yeah. And I think that that sense of belonging to one world, a world of, well, I say labour, but I mean my father's ancestors were cattle dealers and cattle exporters and so on, but the world of field and farm, if you like.
Was it a very poor life?
No, I mean, it wasn't poor because this was during the war. We had our own produce and so on, and I mean, I know people now who were brought up in Derry City, which was about 40 miles away, in the Bogside, and they were poor. I mean, they were depending upon their rations. They had no resources. They had no turnips in the backyard and no potatoes.
So is it when you look back, is it a sort of idyllic world, a sort of
yes,
wonderful world where you were in the fields, in the open?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so, and I don't think that is a sentimental reconstruction. There was a good deal of fear in the air, but I think that all children have...
Is that fear because you were Catholics?
Well, that's
Catholic
different.
Protestant fear?
No. Well, I'm not thinking of that one now. I'm thinking more of fear of things even like horses. Well, I suppose awe is a better word than fear.
Yes.
You're looking up at these creatures with the big teeth and the big hoofs, or fear of frogs. I mean, one of the first poems I wrote was about being scared by frogs croaking. But I mean, the Catholic Protestant thing is something that you inhaled also. I don't think it was fear so much as wariness and a sense of division. I mean, again, to go to Bogside in Derry, which is, we have learned to call it a Catholic ghetto. I mean, it was just Bogside before that. Yeah. If I had been brought up there, I don't think I would have had the same sense. I'd have had a sense of otherness, of another tribe, but being brought up in the country, our neighbours were Protestants. So you had an intimate enough communion with them, and you had very civil exchanges with them, and very good relations with them, but a strong sense of anotherness, of culture, I suppose.
Now, when you started to write, and you say you got away, you were the scholarship boy, I suppose, the clever one of the family. How many brothers and sisters you had?
Well, altogether there are 8 of us now. I'm the eldest.
And were you the high flyer in terms of the academic high flyer, and you got away?
Well, I suppose I...
that background and that boyhood, in a way, I suppose, some people would think that's extremely fortunate for a poet, because do you get many people sort of celebrating cities in that way? I mean, you know, you get people from the bog side writing about their childhood. I mean, in a way, it seems rather good material for a poet.
Of course it is. Yeah. And there's a whole question whether that's a good thing or not. I mean, to have a beautiful world to celebrate. I mean, a lot of people distrusted the authenticity of the experience. I mean, I think it is good in this way that if you say plough, if you say horse, if you say field, if you say stone, those words go right back into the very heart of tradition, sensibility, and civilization, you know.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you say those words to literary university people, they think of poems that are pastoral poems, and they think that you got it all out of books, some of them, you know. So it's ambiguous kind of material in one way. People think of it as cottage industry fake rather than actual experience, and it has to be, therefore, if you're writing about it, handled very carefully, I think. You know.
Did you want, I mean, were you ever attracted to stay on the land or be a farmer, or did you know that you wanted to be a poet early on?
Oh no, I didn't know I wanted to be a poet. No, I ended up, as I say, going through the motions, I think, that my own generation went through. Moving from secondary school to university, doing an arts degree, you know, the first one of the family to move into education ends up in arts, usually, unless they have a fairly clear idea what else to do. And I started to teach in Belfast. I had a kind of repining to do something, like everybody has it in their early 20s. You don't know what you want to do. And I began to read contemporary poetry, contemporary English and Irish poetry. And I got a kind of charge and excitement out of that. And I had thought that modern poetry was T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden, very much urban, very much alienated, and very much beyond my ken, you know.
Well, a lot of people listening, I think, would think that modern poetry that they know is difficult,
yes,
sophisticated, rather smart.
Precisely.
And very difficult to understand.
Yes, exactly. And then, as I say, I read, for example, Patrick Kavanagh's poetry, who is an Irish poet, Ted Hughes's poetry, and this... it was like reading partly about your own life, you know. So you said, my God, you know, your own experience was trustworthy, and I think that
and you felt confident about using that.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. I always like to think of it like this. When we were at school, we were asked to do compositions, and I'm sure everybody listening was to Day at the Seaside, you know. And when I wrote compositions about days at the seaside, I told lies. I didn't write what happened at all. I said that my mother bought me a nice shiny bucket and spade. She never did. And I realised now what she did buy me is much more interesting, you know. She bought me a wooden spoon once so she could take it home afterwards. But you would never think of writing that down, so it's always better to trust your own.
When you moved, I won't say you moved away from using that experience, because it comes up all the time, even in your later books. But at the time you were in Belfast, obviously the trouble started again in 1969. And did people expect you then to write political poems? As a Catholic, did people say, you know, you should be at the front of the barricades writing poems that really reflect what Catholics are feeling about the trouble?
Yeah, immediately, yeah. But of course Catholics weren't sure what they were feeling about the Troubles. I mean, people who want you to write always know exactly what you should be feeling yourself. Some people were saying you should be, you know, condemning, saying there are faults on both sides. Other people say you should be in there supporting the revolutionary cause. And all the terms used, violence, revolution, peace, they're all mined with double takes. And I mean, if one person says peace, if the Provisional IRA say peace, they mean one thing. If the peace people say peace, they mean another thing, you know. If one side says reconciliation, they mean one thing. I mean, the whole thing is a matter of duplicitous language. Not that the people know they're being duplicitous. I mean, when Ian Paisley says democracy, he means majority rule and no power sharing, you know.
For Protestants.
Yeah, and, you know, I mean, so you got, I mean, and I think this is where the poetic responsibility resides. In keeping the thing clean and in keeping yourself clean.
But in fact, you know, I mean, that means sort of the poet's got to be mistrustful of easy slogans, and at the same time, as a Catholic, you must have felt very bound up with that whole movement, the civil rights, and of course when the violence started, you must have had your sympathies on the side of those who were being oppressed, or those
Of
who
course,
felt were being oppressed.
I mean, you remember how the violence started? I mean, the violence started with pogroms into the Falls Road by
People coming into the Catholic area.
You see, my sympathies were, of course, naturally with the tribe out of which I spring, and I think that it was different for the Catholics and the Protestants, the response to the violence. In a way, the nationalist, I prefer the word, I suppose, nationalist to Catholic, because the nationalist or the imagination is always looking forward to some resolution of history in favour of the idea of the nation, the Irish nation. The Protestant or Unionist imagination sees that resolution as already having taken place, so that any disruption seems like just something that has to be stopped, and then normality will return. I think for the Catholics there was a moment of something happening. Things were shifting. The old language was changing. There was a moment of possibility. So, I mean, I'm not given to resentment. I wasn't really resentful, but I was hopeful that the stalemate and the monolith of this Stormont Unionist thing would shift, and that a new language would occur. Mind you, at that time it sounded like a kind of socialist language. You know, it was the time of civil rights and Bernadette standing in mid-Ulster, and a language of have and have not coming in instead of a language of Catholic Protestant.
Yes, but of course then the violence started, and then of course you were really confronted with horrifying things, which I think happen in the poems as well. But in the latest book, this poem, Tomb Road, which is near where your farm used to be, well, what is that about? Can you tell us?
Well, that's precisely about, it's about what it says. It's about being on the road one morning and seeing the army pass by. That's what is the occasion of it. What is more behind it is being stopped by the army at my own gate, you know, and being questioned who I was and what my name was. I mean, there are two ways of regarding this. There is a political reading which says, well, two political readings, but one says the army are peacekeepers in an integral part of the United Kingdom. There's another political reading that says they are an imperial presence in a sovereign nation, Ireland, you know. But there's a third way, and that is precisely to do with the locale, that you're at home here, and there are strangers stopping you and asking you your name. Supposing in the home counties there were a bunch of Irish army people at the end of somebody's avenue, and the different language, the different intonations, the different, you know, the whole different culture of the outsider coming in, questioning you on your own ground.
Right. Can I just ask you, there's one word at the end there, omphalos. What does that mean, omphalos, the very last word of the poem?
Yes. Well, the last word in the poem is the Greek word for the belly button or the navel. But it also meant, therefore, the centre of the Greek world. The omphalos was at Delphi. And so it's used to mean the first place you come from, the place you belong to, the place where the mother link is holding you.
Right.